Welcome to the Metrolinx June board meeting. Thank you all for coming. We've got lots to do today. Janet Ecker is not able to be present because she has another board meeting in direct conflict with this one. And Rahul Bardwa is not able to be here because he's between jobs, as he's taken his new job as president and CEO of the Institute of Corporate Directors, having stepped down as CEO of the Toronto Foundation, and he understandably wanted to take a week's holiday with his family before starting his new job on July the 1st, and so he is in Barcelona with his family rather than with us, and we understand that choice. Sitting at the table is a person not normally recognized here, is Mr. Stephen Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes is the Deputy Minister of Transportation for the province of Ontario. I invited the Deputy to come and join us for the committee meetings and the board meeting to see what we do because we're a decent chunk of his responsibilities, and we're delighted, Stephen, to have you here. Thank you for coming. Feel free to jump into any part of the conversation, we through you, I want to say how grateful we are to the partnership we have with all of your ministry and the many colleagues in the ministry who work closely with us. I've got bad news, unfortunately, on one front. Erica, who has been such an extraordinary strength in supporting us. Erica, you should come forward and accept our congratulations as that you've taken a new job with WSIB, but the bad news is you're quitting on us next week. You've been outstanding in looking after us at the board, and you've been very, very helpful to the public as well in interacting with them in organizing meetings. We're going to miss you a lot. I wish you were staying. I know I can't persuade you to stay, so you go with our best wishes and many thanks. Congratulations, and thank you for all you've done. Yep. I have in front of me a great deal of correspondence, and as is our practice, in the absence of deputations, we do want to note all correspondence that is received about matters on our agenda, and so I will work you through them. Board members, there are copies of all of this correspondence in front of you, and some of it came in overnight, and so some of it you won't have seen yesterday. Let me take you through what we've received. On the question of new stations, on the GO system, we have correspondence about Lakeshore and Park Lawn, the Park Lawn station issue. We have a letter from the Member of Parliament for the area, James Maloney. We have a letter from the provincial legislature, Peter Milchin, the same, and we have letters from city councillors, Justin DiCiano and Justin, and we have and from Councillor Mark Grimes. We also have a report to Councillor DiCiano from Bruce Clayton that's been included, and we have correspondence from Marina Del Rey, the condominium, together with letters of support from Clive Richards, Maria Ancona, Donald Henderson, Anne Gray, Manu Malcani, Landy Gramsci, Lachlan McLaughlin, Loretta Matiazzo, Randy Tugg, Deborah Anderson, Wilson Blanchard Management, Steve Sykes, Shirali Najek, and Malcolm Slater. I think it's fair to say collectively all of these correspondence are in one way or another favoring the addition of a station at Park Lawn, and we can in the discussion address why that's not part of the current recommendation of management. We also have from the City of Vaughan correspondence from His Worship Maurizio Bellavacqua, who congratulates the Metrolinx board for its recommendation that there be a station at Kirby, but raises concerns about the absence of a station at Concord and advances various arguments as to why Concord deserves further consideration at a future time, and draws that to our attention. Third, there is correspondence from Chris Drew and Kevin Montgomery, who are co-founders of the Fight Gridlock in Brampton campaign, and they are joined by a number of co-signatories of their letter from the region, all of whom are strong advocates of expanding GO train service for the Kitchener corridor, as was announced recently by our minister and our president, and they are strongly in favor of those developments and thanking the various parties that have moved that forward. We also have correspondence concerning the Davenport Diamond from Laura Zeglin, who is Chair of Options for Davenport, including enclosing the independent environmental assessment for the Davenport Diamond rail grade separation. We've had correspondence from Ms. Zeglin previously and have had various interactions with her and the community she represents. And finally, we have email correspondence from Gordon Prentice, also a previous correspondent with the board, regarding a proposed new station at Mulock Drive on the GO system. All that correspondence is publicly available to anybody who would wish to see it. I have read all of it, and we will make a point in the meeting of addressing some of these points. In terms of where we are, I think we're in a terrific place. There's been a tremendous amount of work accomplished over the last few months. We're moving forward on all fronts, and the centerpiece of today's meeting is to reflect that progress on Regional Express Rail and the expansion of the GO system. On top of that, we've had an announcement of expanding rail service to Kitchener. We've had an announcement of expansion of rail service to Bowmanville, and there's a media announcement that there should be an announcement by the minister in the Niagara region later today, and there's considerable anticipation in the local media in Niagara that this announcement will include some form of rail expansion into Niagara, with details to follow when the minister makes his announcement later today. He's being accompanied by Greg Percy today, who's not present at this meeting because we needed our president here, and Greg is representing the president with the minister in Niagara. But it really is, Bruce, an extraordinary amount of work you and your team are pushing forward, and we thank you and congratulate you on it. We look forward to the discussion of it in detail. I do want to note that a lot of this work requires a great deal of collaboration and cooperation with our municipal and regional partners, and indeed even beyond as we've moved to Kitchener, and as we have dialogue with Niagara as well. It's really important, this collaboration and cooperation for us as the regional agency. We've been working closely with the various municipalities and of course prominently with the City of Toronto on its ambitions for Smart Track being incorporated into Regional Express Rail, and with all the communities that we affect and touch as we do our work. So thank you for that as well. With that, Bruce, those are my introductory comments, and I call on you for the CEO's report. Bruce McQuaid.
Thank you very much, Chair.
And by the way, I like all this hardware in front of us. Looks like an abundance of awards. I hope you'll tell us about them.
I'll tell the board and the audience about those in a few moments. Thank you for those comments. The first thing I wanted to reflect on to the board, but also through the board and through the media to our customers. The past 24 hours has been a challenging time in terms of the delivery of service and our real commitment to get people back to home or to their offices or their destinations on time, comfortably. Over the course of last night, we did not meet our commitment to our customers with a significant number of disruptions that were all unrelated to each other. About 4 of our 7 corridors were impacted by service disruptions, whether it was because of an equipment issue, a signal or a signalization issue, or whether there are other matters adjacent to the corridor, such as fires that impacted our service levels. The result of all those different kinds of disruptions is that many of our customers had a significant delay to their return back to their homes yesterday. And on behalf of the entire system, I wanted to extend an apology to our customers for the kind of service that they experienced yesterday. It's not the kind of service that we aspire to provide, and in a way it juxtaposed against some of the very positive news that we have in terms of over the course of last year achieving a 94% on-time performance, as well as achieving our highest level of customer satisfaction. The incidents yesterday also were on the day that we were doing major schedule changes for our customers as a result of construction changeover at Union Station, so it made it even more complex for our customers, and we apologize for that. Some of those issues carried forward over into this morning's service, and Again, to the board and to our customers, there was a pedestrian fatality on the Kitchener corridor, and that impacted our Kitchener and our Union Pearson Express services this morning. All those issues have been resolved at this point in time, and service is back to normal. But it was, again, a significant impact on our customers, and we apologize for that. So I just wanted to communicate that to the board and answer any questions. I know that Mary Prock is with us in the audience. If there are any specific questions about yesterday's events and how we responded and how we are making sure that we are trying to avoid those kinds of circumstances in the future. So I can pause there and see if...
I'd keep going.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Thank you.
The second thing I wanted to update is just to reflect on a few of the significant points of success over the past few months. We now have 2 million active Presto cards in circulation being used by customers. That's a significant growth and met all of our targets in terms of the growth of the Presto system. We're also continuing to meet our commitments in terms of the expansion of Presto on the TTC, and over 400 buses are now Presto enabled, and additional subway stations continue to be added to the Presto network almost on a weekly basis. We have seen ridership grow on the Union Pearson Express significantly since our changed the fare model in March, and we're now averaging on a weekday 8,200 passengers, which is more than the threefold increase in terms of the kind of ridership we were achieving prior to the March 9th change in the fare system. We've seen significant new services on our GO bus network, with new maintenance facilities opened in Hamilton and in Alberfoyle, a new terminal for customers at Square One. We've seen progress on the crosstown tunneling project, with the western tunneling now complete, and the tunnel boring machines have stopped their drive at Yonge Street, so that's a significant milestone for the crosstown project. And we've seen new commitments of service and commitments to planning as well, whether that's funding for the planning, design, and engineering work that's needed to advance the relief line, with a $150 million commitment from the province of Ontario, and the Yonge North extension with a $55 million commitment from the province. As you indicated, the announcement of the extension to Bowmanville, an additional service to Kitchener, which includes doubling of our rail service starting in September that serves Acton, Guelph, and Kitchener, a launch of new bus services between Kitchener and the Bramalea GO station, as well as an agreement in principle with CN for a new freight corridor. And I really want to emphasize how important this last point is in terms of transforming the way in which we use our rail system in this region, impacting not just how we can shift goods movement outside of some of our built-up urban areas, but how we can significantly increase the amount of passenger service. I would suggest the kind of transformation that this project will provide is akin to the kind of transformation that occurred back in the 1960s when CN moved its freight operations out of the downtown area, and that allowed GO Transit to be established using the Lakeshore Rail corridors. We also just yesterday launched a new afternoon train to Richmond Hill, providing again more options for our customers. We also have now implemented the agreement with the Toronto Parking Authority for doubling the number of bikes in the bike share system, with our $4.9 million commitment, which is leading over the course of the next few weeks the opening of 120 new stations and 1,000 additional bikes in the system. And then coming to the hardware on the table here, the two middle pieces are Amethyst Awards. And these are the highest honor that the Ontario Public Service provides to its employees and partners. And these are truly partnership initiatives. The first award was given to Metrolinx, but also in a partnership with the Ministry of Transportation and other agencies and ministries of the province of Ontario in the work that was done to so effectively provide transportation services during the Pan Am Parapan Games last summer. The second Amethyst Award is to our team here at Metrolinx, but the team at the Ministry of Transportation as well, for the groundbreaking work that was completed for the initial business case for the Regional Express Rail program, which is raising the bar in terms of the kind of evidence and analysis that goes into these kinds of work. So I'd like to congratulate the ministry team, the Metrolinx team, other partners who've participated in achieving these significant honors. The other pieces that are on the table is just over to my left is the Canadian Green Building Council Government Leadership Award for LEED certification and specifically for the work that we've done in terms of bringing in best practices in environmental and energy management into our facilities. We're very proud of this work in the context of our commitment to sustainability. And the last one I'm going to reference is on my right, which is the Consulting Engineers of Ontario Willis Chipman Award, which we received in partnership with CH2M Hill for the program management work associated with the Union Pearson Express that was focused on delivering that project to budget and to schedule. So congratulations to everybody involved in that process as well. The last thing I wanted to mention.
Expand our trophy case at some point,
Yeah,
Bruce.
that's right.
That's really
That's
impressive.
a good reason.
Congratulations to everybody who contributed to winning those awards.
The last thing I wanted to mention is just I like to acknowledge some individuals as well from time to time, and particularly the key milestones. And I like to reference Bill Jenkins this morning, and Bill is in the audience. And if you could stand for me and maybe come forward. Bill has been with Metrolinx and earlier Go Transit for 31 years, and the last 8 years he's been in charge and for the ongoing delivery and management and operation of all of our stations, and which is the key touch point for customers entering and exiting the service. He joined Go Transit in 1985, I think, Bill, it was, in the engineering area, and has worked in virtually every part of the organization over his career. And just when you just think about his involvement over the past year, he's been instrumental in terms of the launch of the Union Pearson Express, working on the Pan Am Parapan game delivery program here at Metrolinx, opening of the York Concourse, a significant milestone for the organization. And after 31 years, he's retiring from the organization. I'd just like to acknowledge all of his contributions.
Say a few words, Bill. How's it been?
It's been a great pleasure, actually. Thank you very much for allowing me to serve you and the customers and the employees of Go Transit and Metrolinx. It's been a fantastic journey.
Thank you. And what are you doing next?
Cleaning up at home. 31 years of cleanup to do at home.
Thank you for your wonderful, wonderful service and dedication to our interests. You've done a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is my report, Chair.
Good job. Questions to Bruce? Any questions to Bruce at this stage? Most of the stuff's on the agenda to come, but anybody? I think we're good to go. Let's just keep going. Let's go right to the Regional Express report. This is, I think, the longest resolution in the history of Metrolinx. Mary, there are more parts to this resolution. I've got a printed version. It goes on for pages of all the things that management's asking us to authorize. Bruce, given its comprehensive nature of this report, I think you're going to present the report on behalf of the management team, but we'll have the resources of Leslie and John Jensen, Leslie Wu and John Jensen as well, to draw upon as we work our way through this. Over to you, Bruce.
Great, thank you very much. I felt it was appropriate, given how much energy, time, and effort that the team has put into this piece, to join them down here for this presentation. This has truly been a remarkable process, not just within Metrolinx, but in terms of the work that we've been doing with our partners at the City of Toronto, the TTC, and with the province of Ontario as we've moved to advance a concept for Regional Express Rail and its integration with SmartTrack, which is somewhat of a significant focus of the presentation and the report that's been in front of the board. The report that you have includes these various aspects, and it touches on the significant and real progress that we've been making in terms of the delivery of the Go Regional Express Rail program through a variety of initiatives across the network. It includes the recommendations for the additions of new stations as part of the analysis that's been completed over the past months with the City of Toronto and the province. It talks about how do we integrate Regional Express Rail and SmartTrack together in an effective program over the course of what is a 10-year program for Regional Express Rail. Recommendations on the Eglinton West Light Rail Transit line in terms of the extension from the current terminus of the crosstown at Mount Dennis all the way into the Pearson International Airport area, And finally, recommendations for our funding partnership with the City of Toronto to support the incremental additions to GO Regional Express Rail, as well as operations and maintenance of the light rail transit program. I'm not going to go into great detail in terms of the scope of our GO Transit expansion program. I think we've all talked about how transformative this process has been and will be over the next 10 years as we grow the system from our currently weekly total of about 1,500 rail trips to about 6,000 rail trips. And just to demonstrate our commitment, not just to achieve the outcome at the end of the process, but to have outcomes throughout the process, we have been continuing to expand the size of that program. And the last bullet about line extension to new communities, and the recent announcement last week of the extension of service to Bowmanville is an illustration of how we're working not just on the existing network, but how we can grow that network and invite new customers into the service in the future. In terms of the infrastructure needs, we previously talked about the amount of infrastructure that's going to be required in terms of new track across the network, bringing in new rolling stock in the form of electrified locomotives and electric multiple units, widening bridges and tunnels, and making sure that there's the sufficient height for overhead catenary in the future, for example. And virtually every station that we have in the network will have some work completed over the course of the program to add platforms, to add tunnels, to add elevators, to expand parking. So in sum total, the amount of effort that's going to be going into the network is significant, is a level that we've never seen in the GO Transit network in the past. It is a process that started about 18 months ago, and we've made great progress already. We have about 11 environmental assessment processes that are either complete, that are actively underway, or about to be launched, and they set the context for all the infrastructure that we need to deliver. That we're having conversations with municipalities about the grade separations and how we partner with municipalities to deliver on those, which are such a significant interface with the road network and the other forms of transportation in these communities. We have construction underway on track work on different corridors, on layovers and station improvements. We're finalizing our planning and design for future elements. And of course, all this takes partnership, not just with municipalities, but recognizing that we have the communities and neighborhoods that we are traveling through, that we need to work very closely with them as we work through the kind of infrastructure improvements that have to be made, and recognize that they are impactful on their neighbors that we have along the corridor. You see in the image here somewhat dramatic picture of how we install tunnels into the rail corridor in prefabricated units, and this is at the Guildwood GO station. And again, this is to improve accessibility and to recognize the fact that we need to increase the level of service at these kinds of stations. Now, to the point of new stations, the board will recall that we started with about 120 new sites across the network. And through a business case process, we've narrowed that down to the 12 recommended locations that are before the board today. In going through this process, we looked at strategic, economic, financial, and operational issues, and maybe just to put a little bit more richness to what those factors mean in terms of more of a plain language, we basically looked at the relative cost of delivering of the delivery of different projects, how deliverable and complex those delivery programs would be, the ridership impacts, not just in the terms of new riders that we would attract to the system, but the impact of having new station stops and an added time on existing and future riders that are traveling the system from other stations. The connection to regional destinations in terms of the immediate vicinity of station locations, the link to land use and transit-oriented development, and connections to other elements of the regional transit and transportation system. And those are just some of the factors that are considered when we look at the strategic, economic, financial, and operational issues. And those all get rolled up into our final technical recommendation on potential station locations. I would also like to emphasize that while we're recommending 12 stations now, that does not mean we're saying no to the other stations. What we're saying is that these are the 12 stations that we believe have merit to proceed at this point in time, and we will continue a dialogue with municipalities and communities about other station locations as we go forward. So this is not the end of the story in terms of the continued evolution of the GO Transit network. There will continue to be a dialogue with municipalities. So when we look at the 12 new stations, they basically fall into three categories. There are some that are located in what I will term as mature, high-density areas. There are some that are in areas that I would consider to be emerging growth areas. And there's a third category that are intended to capture new markets that we are currently not serving. So on the Barrie corridor, you see the 5 locations identified, and Spadina, for example, would fall into a category of a new station location that's serving mature, high-density areas, even in the context of a lot of new development occurring in the downtown west area. When we look at a location like Innisfil, that would be a location that's serving or capturing new markets, because we don't currently have stations in that particular area, and it allows us to introduce our services to a new prospective customer who would use that service in the future. Similarly, when we look at the Kitchener corridor, Liberty Village in the area of King Street would be an example of serving a high-density area that's both maturing in terms of the kind of development that's occurred over the last 10 years, but is also attracting more and more additional development. But then there's a location like Breslau in Waterloo region that allows, again, ourselves to introduce the service to a new market and to try to capture as much of that market as possible. So you can go through each one of these different station locations, and you can look at them in the context of not just the technical analysis that went into the evaluation of these and other stations, but also the kind of markets that they're going to be serving in the future. The other piece is, how do we integrate with the SmartTrack system? And of those 12 new stations, approximately 6 are on the SmartTrack network, which is comprised of the Stouffville corridor, the Kitchener corridor, and of course the Union Station Rail corridor. We've been working closely with the City of Toronto as we develop the business cases for those locations. And we've been integrating the analysis to make sure that we're attracting and providing new choices for people who live and work in the City of Toronto to access the system in different locations. Those 6 stations come with a capital construction cost somewhere in the order of $700 million to $1.1 billion. And that's a conversation point that we're continuing to have with the City of Toronto as we narrow the technical issues associated with different locations. We'll get a better sense of what is the final cost of these station additions. The other part of the integration process is the level of service, of course, between Regional Express Rail and SmartTrack. The board will recall that Regional Express Rail is premised on a 15-minute, 2-way, all-day electrified service. And the conversations with the City of Toronto is how can we increase the level of service along the Stouffville and Kitchener corridors, for example, to get to frequencies that are in the range of 7 to 9 minutes in peak periods, so that we're providing a higher level of service to those communities. Just going on to Eglinton West LRT extension very briefly, the board will recall that originally the proposal had been to put in place a heavy rail corridor along this stretch of Eglinton Avenue. Through the work that the City of Toronto had done, they had come to the conclusion, which mirrored our previous work that we had completed, is that an LRT was a preferred solution for this corridor. We have been working with the City of Toronto as well as with the community to identify how we can optimize what was previously approved for an LRT extension, and that includes looking at station locations and what is the optimal number of stations, as well as looking at are there specific points where we should be evaluating and putting in place grade separations at key intersections to reduce the impact on north-south vehicular traffic that are also using some of these major arterial roads. We've worked very closely with the City of Toronto to develop the enhanced, or the business case for the enhanced Eglinton West Rapid Transit Project. And with some of the next steps that are really important to move towards what we would consider to be a final recommendation for the project would be more detailed traffic analysis, the design of different grade separations, identifying the final stop locations, and working with the Greater Toronto Airports Authority in terms of the alignment into Pearson International Airport. And throughout this process, we have to work very, very closely with the local communities that are along Eglinton Avenue West because of the significant change that this means for the neighborhoods that they live in. Some of the other work that we've been undertaking with the City of Toronto, either in partnership or in parallel, included in the report that's being presented to Toronto's Executive Committee and ultimately on to City Council. We've achieved a significant alignment of our staff recommendations with the City of Toronto staff recommendations on the areas I've just gone through. And the report also includes, our report also includes recommendation in terms of how we work with the City of Toronto to move ahead and advance the development of a concept for the relief line in terms of its planning, engineering, and design work, and how we can leverage the significant investment that the province of Ontario is making to make sure that we come up with a project that achieves local interests and transportation needs, as well as regional interests and transportation needs. And we're also working very closely with the City of Toronto on the planning analysis for the eastern extension of the Eglinton LRT towards the University of Scarborough campus in that part of the city. In terms of next steps, we are requesting that municipalities review our recommendations and confirm their agreement with these locations of these 12 stations, as well as their commitment to work with us in terms of transit-oriented development as we move forward. That we're going to be working with the advancement of the Eglinton West LRT with Toronto, Mississauga, and the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, and that we need to develop a memorandum of agreement with the City of Toronto and the TTC for additional planning work on the relief line. And we also have to have memorandums of agreements with other municipalities and with the city on other additional planning initiatives that are underway to advance the Big Move Regional Transportation Plan. And then we'll be working with the Ministry of Transportation and municipalities on how do we move forward the overall Regional Express Rail program to the ultimate delivery, both in the short, medium, and then ultimately in the 10-year longer-term picture. The remaining slides I have here are really just a summary of the proposed resolution that's contained in the staff report. So I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but all three of us are happy to answer any questions.
That's an excellent job, Bruce. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm sure it raises lots of questions. Just to organize the discussion, I'm just going to suggest we take the discussion in a way that maps to the resolution. And the resolution, the first chunk of the resolutions deal with station locations and conditions associated with stations. So I'm going to suggest we start there, and then we'll work to the other pieces of it. The board, of course, has had a number of prior reports on this topic, so we're, I think, familiar with the approach and the methodology you were using, but this is the time to actually approve the conclusions that have come out of it. One way of getting at it might be to reflect the correspondence we received asking about stations that weren't included, because whenever you had a long list, 50 as I recall, and then you're down, and you've drawn a line at the recommendation. So maybe I can start with Park Lawn. Park Lawn, we've had a number of communications come in, MP, MPP, city councillors, residents, condominium owners, all of whom would have preferred you to have drawn the line with Park Lawn included. So maybe one of you could speak to the aspects that caused Park Lawn to fall short of the mark, at least at this time.
Thank you. And I'll start, and then I'll ask Leslie to fill in any of the details that I missed. First of all, I should say to all the communities who don't see their particular stations identified within the list of 12, again, I want to emphasize it doesn't mean that we're saying no to those stations. We're saying that we're recommending the other 12 stations at this point in time. In the case of Park Lawn, we believe we have more work to do with the City of Toronto in the context of the future development plans for the former Christie site. And how do we integrate transit into the planning for that location. It also is very strongly linked to the future of the Mimico GO station. Mimico and Park Lawn are very close together, and if we were to open up a new station at Park Lawn, a logical next step would be to potentially close the station at Mimico. So we need to work closely with other communities about that implicit implication. There's also some complexities at the Park Lawn station that we need to work through. Those include the location very closely tied to a very complex area, the Gardiner Expressway. And then on the west side of the location is the Humber Valley and some very significant environmental features. And then finally, another significant piece that the City of Toronto is advancing is their planning work on a proposed waterfront LRT. And I think we have more work to do with the City of Toronto to determine what's the best and most effective way to serve the people who live in that community now and in the future through an LRT and also potentially through a station at this location. So those would be my 4 or 5 points. Leslie, would you have anything in addition to that?
No, I think that those cover very well the challenges with that location. It is primarily the proximity to Mimico that makes it challenging, as well as the Park Lawn location, the sort of basket weave that happens around the Gardner at that point, crossing over, it's on a slight curve, is technically also very challenging in terms of to the left or to the right of that intersection. So, so those are, I think Bruce has covered them fairly
So the
well.
correspondence includes a comment by at least one of the residents that, I'll just quote, says, "The closest GO station," this person says, this is Malcolm Slater, "I live in one of the many condos in the Park Lawn Lakeshore area. Our closest GO station is Mimico, which is a 25-minute walk or a 7-minute drive. Unfortunately, there is no parking available at the station, as most of the parking spaces are reserved." If it's a 7-minute drive, that would suggest maybe that a Park Lawn station would be not as, you're saying they're very close together, where Park Lawn and Mimico. This letter, the implication might be this person would think they'd be farther apart. How far apart are they, in fact?
They're under a kilometer, which is very close.
Under a kilometer apart, where the Park Lawn station would go
Yeah.
if there were one?
Yeah, and the challenge is from the lens of the regional system, it's close. From the lens of someone walking, obviously, it's seemingly far, which means we need to address it not just in terms of the regional network, but the local transit network as well, and what it can serve to offer more choice to the residents in that area.
Other directors on Park Lawn, and then we'll go to another one. Bonnie and then Ann.
Just to follow up on that, and what about the parking situation? The comment about but the spaces are all reserved. Is there nothing, or is someone looking at the parking issue? Because a number of these letters either say, I could do that, but I can't park, or I could go there, but there's no parking. In this case, it's a reserved parking. Who
Right,
looks
so
at
we do
that?
have a supply of parking at Park Lawn, at Mimico, and we've actually have just expanded the amount of parking that's available at that location. We do have a challenge in that, in somewhat like a lot of our other stations, that there's more demand than there is supply of parking. We do have a reserve parking program, and we cap the amount of parking that we provide at any one station, so that there always is a certain amount of parking that's available for people who do not reserve in advance. But there is no question that in any situation where you have limited supply and more demand, then it means at a certain point of the day there is a lack of parking available at Mimico. So we realize that's an issue. At a location like Mimico, which I would consider more of an urbanized station, I think part of the solution that we need to work on with the City of Toronto is transit accessibility, pedestrian and cycling accessibility into the station as well. Whether that station is at Mimico or whether it's in the future at Park Lawn, we want to, in that kind of a venue, probably rely less on drive and park and more on alternative ways to get to the station.
Ann Golden?
Well, my question was tied to Rob's. It's just that we had been briefed on this, so I hadn't, it was these letters that have, both in the ridership projections and the intensity of the case they make, it's just not jibing for me. If it's a kilometer away, it's not 25-minute walk. I'm just trying to understand the distance.
Well, I think it's a kilometer as you go down a very straight rail corridor. But as driving the road network to get to Mimico, it's probably a longer distance. Yeah. So if it's, I think Leslie was answering the question, how far apart are the two stations by the rail line?
As the crow flies.
As the crow flies.
Which is in the corridor, as that
Yes.
the crow flies.
For anybody to get there,
you have to go, yes, through the road fabric, and it's longer that way, no question.
Yeah, so.
But the problem, I take it, is big train comes in the station, by the time it starts up, it's already started to arrive at the next station if they're less than a kilometer apart.
Well, with being so close together, they don't even get up to speed. They'll be, in a way, coasting from station to station.
Is there
They're
anything we
that
can do
close.
to improve the walking, biking access from, if it's only a kilometer away?
Yes.
I don't know. I actually don't know the specific, I mean,
Right, and that's the work that we would like to do with the city is
have some
look
sympathy
at
for
the overall accessibility is one facet of it, but also the linkage to the land use, current and future in the area as well.
thank you.
The next one, is anybody else on Park Lawn? Concord, you're recommending new stations on the corridor, on the Barrie corridor, but you didn't land on one at Concord. The mayor congratulates you on putting one at Kirby and is keen on that, but he thinks you'd be done an even better job if you were recommending one at Concord too. Can you speak to why you didn't recommend one at Concord?
Yes, and this goes to one of the fundamental pieces that we need to evaluate when we look at how many new stations can we put into a new corridor. And the board will recall that we are getting some time savings as we move to an electrified service. The acceleration and deceleration characteristics of an electric locomotive or electric multiple unit are more efficient than a diesel locomotive. That means that we're reducing travel times. Every time that we add a new station, we start to eat into those travel time savings. So on a corridor like Barrie, we might save, 10, 12 minutes along the entire length of the corridor in terms of travel time. Every time we're adding a station, we're adding upwards of 4 or 5 minutes to the travel time. So we've added 5 in this corridor. And we've been looking at what is the right balance between providing more accessibility, more customers coming on at those stations, as opposed to the disbenefit of increasing travel times for the people who are getting onto the service further north. And that's really one of the key characteristics that brought us to the conclusion that there are some stations that we shouldn't put on at this point in time. But again, I'd like to emphasize that this doesn't mean that it's never we would do a station at these locations, but we are prepared to work with the community. And we do realize that at Concord there are opportunities potentially to integrate in with the regional transportation network with the York Viva Rapid Way. And those are conversations we'd like to have with York Region about how we might be able to look at development, a potential station at the location, other services, and see how we can progress from that point.
Could that potentially be a non-parking station? Is the regional transportation good enough, the local transit options good enough that you could just have a station where you only get to it by taking other forms of transit? It's
certainly a better scenario than other suburban locations where there aren't access to higher order transit. So the accessibility through Viva Rapid Way is much higher than in other locations. I would expect, though, there'd still be a requirement for a certain level of parking given the nature of development in that part of York Region.
Other questions on Concord? Bill, you know this whole area.
I know.
What are your views on Concord?
Well, certainly the indication that the future holds very well for Concord is in fact quite true. The development potential is absolutely incredible. I'm proud to say that the transit connections, which we've developed over the last really 15 years, are second to none in my opinion. And the subway also, which will opening up next year, will begin to do that as well. So I think you'll be looking at this station in about 2 years' time, with a great deal of pressure over the next 2 years to expand dramatically in that corridor, along with a few other corridors in the area. But I think your point is well taken. The mayor's very supportive, of course, of Kirby, as he should be, and understands fully, as we do in York Region, that time does seem to solve most of our problems. And if we work together with you, amazing things happen. So I think you're on the right track, if I can use that.
So you're okay with not
Yes, I am.
including Concord now?
At this moment
But
in
you
time.
keep a watching brief on
Correct.
Concord?
Correct.
Other perspectives on Concord or questions on Concord? The third one, we have, oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie.
So, Rob, this may not be appropriate for now, so we'll come back to it. As we think about each of these, whether it's the Barrie line or another line, at what point is there a rule of thumb that you have to start looking at alternative methodologies for the travel, like an express and new tracks and so on? Is there just as you gave a rule of thumb that a new station adds 4 to 5 minutes in terms of the time on that corridor, is there a rule of thumb you look at related to when you address then in a very different way if you're going to add a station?
That is, you go to Express as well as,
Express or some other methodology?
Yes, and I would say that's part of the equation on the Barrie corridor. We are planning and building out the new stations and new bridges, for example, to accommodate not just a second track, but potentially a third track in the future, so that we could start to introduce some express services. And if we were to do that, then that's part of the consideration about can you add additional stations to then use some of the step up in travel time that you mine from having a mix of local and express services.
But your quantum in cost goes exponentially.
Yes, and right in our 10-year program, RER program, we have the budget to double the track along the entire length of the corridor. We're electrifying the entire length of the corridor, and we're pre-building some of these structures to accommodate even a higher level service, but we don't have funding to do that higher level service at this point in time.
let me take us then to the Mulock station, which you are recommending, but we have correspondence from Mr. Prentice, where he asks whether you've paid sufficient attention to York Region's report on stations, grade separations, and the like. A very complimentary report, I should say, in terms of working with Metrolinx, but raising the need for additional grade separations and like. Do you have a comment on the relationship between the York Region transportation planning thinking and our thinking on Mulock in particular and the area in general?
I'm happy to answer that question. We work very closely with York, and they just recently are in the process of adopting their transportation master plan. So what we are recommending and where the region and the municipalities are headed, we are in alignment. What we need to work through is what I would call the details of which Bruce mentioned before, specific grade separations and bridges and so forth, and that's work in progress. So I think that it is a very compatible working relationship with the region, and we anticipate that to continue.
The other question raised by Mr. Prentice is whether, now that you've put a station into Mulock, just above Aurora, if I have the geography right, could you extend the 15-minute service up to Mulock instead of stopping it at Aurora, which I think is the current service plan?
So right now, again,
I have a sense Mr. Henderson might live somewhere nearer to Mulock than Aurora.
absolutely.
Mr. Henderson, if you're watching, that's an unfair comment, but it's just a thought, that wherever you draw the line, again, you have challenges about just above the line.
Right, so we're making a step change investment in the overall GO Transit system with the $13.5 billion program that the province has provided. But even with that huge investment, we've had to make trade-offs on how do we optimize the investment to get the most benefit for the available funds. And as part of that process, we looked at what is the logical point where we could, in the 10-year horizon, basically have the 15-minute service extend to, still have increased levels of service north of that point into the Barrie area, but we came off with Aurora as being that logical point. Again, that doesn't mean that we will never increase the level of service. In fact, the program does include an increase in the level of service between Barrie and Toronto, and there is opportunities in the future to expand that service.
But for now, Mr. Prentice shouldn't hold his breath to going beyond Aurora.
Not the 15-minute service, no.
Any more on Mulock? The next one's not in the correspondence. This comes from all my neighbors. I live in Uxbridge, as you know, and there's no consideration, apparently, of extending the track to Uxbridge. Can you just comment on that? Because I have to answer this question almost every weekend as to why there's no service beyond Lincolnville up to Uxbridge. I get beat up about every weekend.
Okay, well, we will.
Does anybody have a view on that?
When we looked at the RER program, we looked at where the existing corridors, and we felt that, again, going to that existing termination point was the logical place for the time being in the midterm. But we can certainly take that back and have a conversation about why we came to that conclusion, so that you have something to talk to your neighbors about.
Uxbridge is a thriving, vital community, growing, full of the arts, full of industry, full of entrepreneurs, and Lincolnville's in the middle of a farm fields with no community around it. So as a terminus, the people of Uxbridge feel Uxbridge would be a better terminus than Lincolnville.
Thank you.
enough special pleading, and I acknowledge it's special pleading on my part. Carl, you were next.
Thank you.
We're still on, so the subject is stations generally at this point.
Correct. Using all of the actual resolution that's on the screen right now, several of those points, Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4, near Keel Street, near Bayview, in vicinity of Carlaw, near Greenhouse Road. When is the process going to unfold as to be more specific in that?
You want to start?
Yeah, so I can answer that. For purposes of this preliminary analysis, we identified possible locations. So now once the board agrees with these are the locations we should pursue, we will begin to work with the municipalities on a more closely landing between now and the end of the year, so that we have a better sense as well as what the cost would be. Also, so that these locations could be included as we move forward, as John moves forward with the procurement to advance the RER program, so we don't miss the window to enable these stations to be included in our full 10-year program.
And I just really want to emphasize that point. In the proposed board resolution, you'll see the date of November 30th, and that date is really important because that allows us to basically include station locations in the comprehensive procurement package that's going forward with RER. If we miss that timeline, then we won't be able to include them, and that means they get into a later schedule. So it's an important date from our perspective.
So that discussion at the local level, would that be included in some particular cases, probably specific landowners at this point in time?
Yes.
We've already had
yeah.
that kind of conversation with some.
So it would include landowners, the municipalities. Some of them will require, we're pretty sure some will require some land use changes. We will want to engage with the help of the municipalities, with the local communities. So there's quite an intensive little conversation that has to happen between now and the end of the year. Not every single detail needs to be landed by the end of the year, but we have to sort of bring things in a higher degree of certainty.
You'd hope for negotiations on this, but no doubt there may be some circumstances where expropriation may be required.
That's our last recourse, yes.
Thank you.
I think Howard was next.
Bruce, with the expansion that's being planned, new stations, new areas, etc., what challenges does this place in terms of the security? What are your thoughts, both for the new stations, both for the system itself, and how is this shared or with the municipalities or the regions? What is the cost impact and internal versus external? Any thoughts on that?
Well, as part of the overall RER program, I think I mentioned earlier on that we are going to be looking at and doing some work at virtually every station in the network, and that is adding accessibility and capacity in terms of platforms and things of that nature. But it's also upgrading those stations so that they have more access to the kinds of security features that I think our customers would want, things like enhanced lighting, particularly in the parking areas, more use of closed-circuit television so we have better security across the network. So that would be part and parcel as we upgrade all of our stations to a new and higher and better standard.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Any other comments on stations generally? To understand the conditional, to go in the bottom part of the resolution under stations, you're saying these are, I think you're saying these are all conditional recommendations in that they require buy-in by each municipality to the land use, to the location. There's quite a lot to do before this is a done deal. Is that right?
Yes.
This is, you recommend these if the municipalities will work to optimize that station and make it work well. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Absolutely, and we need to work, as we always do, in partnership with the municipalities to have the best possible solution. And in this case, the best possible solution includes having a very strong link between the transportation investment being made and the land use that's being designed around it. The growth plan and the regional transportation plan all identifies, the kind of conditions that need to be in place in order to maximize the investment in the infrastructure. And that means transit-oriented development, accessibility for a variety of means of transportation into and through the service, having mixed uses. All those things are, the solution for every site will be different and will have to reflect the community in which it's located. But we do need to have a deep conversation with municipalities about how we partner to get the most benefit about the investment that we'll collectively be making.
Ann?
Well, just on that point, and I've asked this before in general, around the value capture opportunities, is there a very specific approach on these stations that are, where it's possible to try to think that through?
We have had conversations with landowners in the area around some of the stations about their interest in partnering in terms of the delivery of the infrastructure, and in some cases there is a strong interest. So we would expect that some of these stations will see an active participation from the private sector in terms of the investment in them.
And even to defray some of the costs?
Absolutely.
And is that part of this, we speak about working with the municipalities, but is it fair to say you also expect to negotiate directly with some of the principal landowners and ask them to contribute to this if the station is to go ahead? Take the Unilever site. My impression is the Unilever developers have a huge stake in that station and would be prepared to make a contribution, a meaningful contribution, a material contribution to the land necessary for the station, to the cost of constructing the station, integrating the station with other aspects of the commercial development, whatever. Is that also intended as part of the conditionality here?
It's intended that we would solicit investment levels from some of the benefiting landowners in the area. That is, I think, embedded in the conversation that we have with the municipalities. We would have those conversations with landowners in partnership with the municipalities. We wouldn't do that unilaterally or independently. We would want to do that in concert with. And there are a number of these stations where they lend themselves very much so. Improved accessibility between a station and the development, for example, that brings value to the developer, and we think that they should be making a contribution that's commensurate with the kind of benefit they're receiving.
Ian, were you going to comment on this?
Well, in the case of Uxbridge, it would mean that if you wrote a check for the station, Mr. Chair, then we could probably think about that.
Thanks very much.
Good negotiation.
Touche, I take the point. I'll speak to my neighbors. We're not a wealthy community out there.
You're negotiating
We're a
already.
vibrant and vital community of artists and artisans and others. Anything more on stations before I take us to Smart Track integration and Eglinton West? Smart Track integration, Bruce, 2.1 in the resolution. You're seeking confirmation of the stations. We've already discussed the stations. I'm not sure there's more unless anybody wishes to speak against the concept of integration as it has evolved over the past year. Is that the fair question?
That's right.
That's the other thing that's embedded in this 2.1?
Yes.
I don't see anyone differing on that. That brings us to Eglinton West LRT, where you're working with the city to optimize that design. You're talking 11 to 15 stops. You're also working with the airport, and you're also going to work with Mississauga to make sure it all ties together, to make sure we get entry to Pearson eventually, and that it ties to the transitway coming from Mississauga. Anything more you need to say on Eglinton West beyond what's in the report?
I think the only thing I would want to emphasize is to the community that lives along the corridors is that we are strongly committed to engaging with them throughout the process, and we understand that there are real and understandable issues that we need to work through with them.
And what are the community-based reservations to having an LRT along Eglinton, which seems like a fabulous addition to people living in that area? What's the reservation?
And I would first of all emphasize, and I'll ask Leslie to fill in some of the gaps, but I would first of all emphasize that it's an opportunity to transform how people move through the community and access different parts of the city, and not just the city. There's actually more people we model that will be moving west through this corridor, for example, in the morning peak period to access the major employment around the airport then is moving east towards the subway system. So I think the huge benefit to the community is the first thing I'd say. I think the reservations are along the line of, how do we manage significant traffic that continues to occur in this area, and particularly some of the intersections between the north-south arterial roads and the east-west route for the Eglinton West LRT. And that's where we have a conversation about where does it make sense to grade separate some of those points so that we can minimize the impact as much as possible on some of those key north-south links. Leslie, is there anything else?
I think that covers it. I mean, the community's major concern is traffic and any domino impact that it may have on traffic congestion because of the left turning lanes and so forth. So we need to work that through with them.
That then brings us to 3, which deals with the cost and instructing staff to continue discussions among the orders of government so that the new stations in the City of Toronto, the Eglinton West LRT proposal, and various infrastructure and services will be funded by the City of Toronto and the Government of Canada, which is previously committed to supporting of Smart Track. Is there anything more you need to say on this other than that those conversations continue? You've added a deadline of November 2016 to get a commitment from the city, which, as I understand it, is because we will be going out to begin procuring these services by then, and we need to know whether the city's in or whether the city's not in. And so it's not trying to be difficult, it's trying to keep the procurement on schedule to deliver RER within the 10 years that we were assigned to get it done. And is that why the November deadline is there?
Absolutely. We do want to partner with the city and with the federal government to deliver more. At the same time, we have to deliver what the province has invested in and directed us to deliver in the 10-year horizon. So that timing for John to go out and have a comprehensive procurement is really critical for Metrolinx to be able to achieve on the province's objectives.
Any questions on the funding position? As you know, these negotiations are ongoing with the city, but this will bring them presumably to a head, and the city's discussing funding questions starting today as well. So it's going to be a rich conversation, I would guess, between now and November. That brings us to the last point, which is 4, which is to direct staff to do what we've been asked to do, which is to advance the relief line in collaboration with the City of Toronto and with the TTC. We've been given a grant of $150 million to advance this planning work, and we're asking management to do this and to let us know from time to time how that work is going as the planning is refined. Anything to add on that, Bruce?
The city has done an enormous amount of work on advancing the relief line, and our first task is to work in detailed discussions with the cities to understand the work that they've completed, complete our due diligence, work with the TTC, and then develop the work program going forward to advance the project. So we're really excited about the commitment to move ahead with this project, and we think this is a real opportunity to achieve a key priority that's set out in the Regional Transportation Plan.
Any questions on that one? I see none. Those are the elements of the resolution. The question is, does any member of the board have any question about any aspect of this report, anything that's covered? I've tried to keep us structured on the specifics, but the entire report is open for questions, comments, your comfort with it, your discomfort with it. Any comments? Upcar, you okay with this whole thing?
Yep.
You're good to go? Yep. Ian, this all fine with you?
Go.
Absolutely.
You're okay?
My comment is, go, it's a lot.
Yeah, huge.
It is. It's an extraordinary amount of.
Hats off in that time period to actually have laid out a framework for this, and it will be iterative. I think is what they're saying in terms of new stations and the change in locomotives and trains and how going from diesel to electrified. I mean, it's a process, and I think the train has left the station, right? So, congratulations. Yeah.
Transformational.
Transformation, it's, yeah, it
That
is,
was that metaphorical as well as?
probably.
Yeah.
I get points for it,
Yeah,
yeah.
you do.
I was a little disappointed you didn't comment favorably that there was a discsion of design excellence in the course of the report.
She did point it out.
I'm waiting for my turn at the
Yeah.
podium.
Fair enough. Bonnie, you okay with all this?
With it, yes.
Howard, you okay?
Go.
You guys okay?
I'll go.
Is the ministry good with this?
Sure.
Billy?
I'm okay, but Mr. Chairman, I have to say, I was on this board, as you remember, 19 years ago, and we dreamed then about some of the possibilities that go transit then, a commuter system, 2 or 3, train trips a day. We dreamed about something like this happening. The dollars were on the table, and it was just probably it was $2 billion then, who knows how much it was, way beyond our thinking. And now, having the newest member of the board, having come back to see that it's possible. What we dreamed is actually possible. It's astonishing. The next 10 years will be incredible, I think, for this organization. And the next 10 to 20 years will be finally incredible for the people of the Greater Toronto Area. And I can only tell you that it's a great concept, and go, go, go. That's what I
An
would say.
emotional moment.
Yeah, it is. In some respects, it is.
If I do get another moment, I'd just like to say it goes from, the idea of a train moving through space, and the implications have become so much larger in terms of the touch point for customer experience, in terms of setting down in a station, getting safely to a parking lot, the public realm surrounding a station, the implications in terms of transit authorities of other smaller adjacent municipalities. I mean, the mandate is very broad, and it's, I think it's a challenge to Metrolinx to think how to manage this in the context of design excellence, because so much more is being built than rail and ordering cars, train cars. So I think that's just a huge aspect, and so I'm very pleased that we heard that the design excellence mandate yesterday in our committee meeting, the challenges that are there, the team that is building up, the level of authority and the kind of culture of thinking about these touch points for customers is really growing. So it's gone from being an engineering-driven assignment to being something very much broader, and I think very much aligned with our thinking as city builders and the kind of changes that will come to the economy of the province through all of this.
And
So it's a big deal.
And maybe, Chair, before you put the matter to a vote, if I could just again thank, there's been a huge number of people in the organization who've been working to get this done. So I'd like to thank them all for all the energy they put in over the past months, weekends and evenings. And I think Leslie has something she wants to say as well.
I also want to thank the City of Toronto, because to get to this kind of refined language, the amount of work, the back and forth with them has been really one of the greatest tests of our ability to partner. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've come to a place that we both, at least on the staff side, have some agreement about what we both agree should be recommended to move forward. So that's specifically with the City of Toronto, and secondarily, or not secondarily, but also to the other municipalities in the region for whom this has been an ongoing discussion over the last year, not to diminish their role in us being able to get to this point. And to, of course, echo Bruce's congratulations to the staff team. In the history of this organization, we have never done 17 business cases in one go. So that's huge, and I don't even know if the history we've ever done 17 in total. So to accomplish this in the amount of time, I don't want to underestimate the effort. Thank you.
Excellent comments by both of you. Thank you for that. I'm going to, in a moment, give Bill the opportunity to move the motion, since it's realizing his fantasies. I don't want to deprive you of that opportunity, and I'm prepared to sell the opportunity to second it to whoever's the highest bidder. But I did want to comment, there are also a whole series of appendices to the reports, which are here. They're for information. I did want to note the one on station access we discussed in committee yesterday. And Leslie, you won't be surprised, I want to express a reservation about the tone of that report, which is about parking. I am more of a champion of more parking at numerous of our stations that are parking challenged at present than that report would suggest. But I know that's a work in progress, and you're going to drive it forward, and there'll be a chance to discuss it at the board and the like. But I do think in cases where our customers can't get parking, where there are opportunities to improve it, and where there are not decent alternatives available to them in terms of public transit opportunities, I think we should be pressing forward with priority to add those parking opportunities. I know it's a study, it's a personal view, but I didn't want that report to be taken as necessarily reflecting the views of the board in its reservations about undue building out of parking. But that's just a comment. Bill, will you move the motion?
I'd be pleased to, thank you.
Who would like to second the motion for all of these things? Ann Golden. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? I see none. Congratulations, Leslie. Congratulations, John. Congratulations, Bruce, and through you three to the entire staff who've done a great job. That brings us to an even more demanding subject, which is GTHA fare integration. We have an update report today from Leslie on fare integration. And Leslie, I'd be grateful if you and your team would bring us up to date. And we've allocated, let me just check, we've allocated up to 30 minutes for this matter, and we're running 3 minutes behind, so we've allocated 27 minutes to this item.
Thank you, Chair. And for those of you that don't know, this is Eve Wyatt. Eve has been one of our key management leading the exercise alongside our colleagues at the Ministry of Transportation and our municipal partners. So this has been quite a collaborative effort to date. What we are presenting or what is emerging out of our analysis, as you may recall, I won't do a slide by slide, but just to remind folks that part of the reason we are addressing the issue of fare integration is really in the context of the amount of growth that's happening here, as well as with the amount of transit that we're investing. There's quite a lot of new opportunities for interface between the different transit systems, which means our fare system needs to grow and mature to meet those needs from the 11 different fare structures that exist today. We are, as our minister would say, in a transit renaissance, and the $31 billion worth of investment by the province of Ontario we need to really optimize, and our fare structure is one of the mechanisms by which we can do that. We are fortunate that the Presto fare card is now fully rolling out throughout the whole region, and that it is a huge enabler in our ability to consider different options for a new fare structure. It's complemented by the importance of further work that we're doing to advance service integration by local transit operators and their service, not only to GO, but amongst themselves. And of course, we know right now that the customer of today has a far greater expectation of the quality of service and the way in which they are moving around. So today, we already have some fare integration occurring between the 905 and the GO system. That's been in existence for several years. But in some areas, customers are still required to pay two fares in key areas, and those are between local transit and the 905 and the TTC, and between the TTC and GO Transit itself. So in those two cases, travelers are paying the equivalent of a double fare. And the challenge with a double fare is that it's discouraging certain types of transit use, and by virtue converse, increasing auto use, in particular in short to medium length trips across the Toronto boundary. It's also causing people to make what we consider inconvenient travel choices. So choosing cheaper, slower trips instead of ones that are actually faster, and then driving to across the boundaries to avoid a double fare. It's also basically not optimizing the potential for a market of this new cross-boundary. Just in context, cross-boundary trips in the GTHA across the Toronto boundary represent about 12 to 13% of all the trips in the whole region. Sorry, I'm going to go back. It's a complicated, you've heard me say this before, but this particular file is fairly complicated, partly because it touches so many people, and there is no obvious right or wrong solution. In our analysis in other jurisdictions, it was clear that there was no one size that fits all, and also important to note that in large urban centers, the fare systems evolve over time. They aren't sort of created from scratch. We know that this has to be a highly collaborative process with municipalities, and as a result, our process to date has been fairly engaged with the transit authorities, municipalities. Even I have been, and with Bruce, been around to meet with the city managers and CEOs of all the municipalities who have transit agencies. We've had public consultations, and we are still in this engagement process. One of the early pieces of work that we did alongside the transit agencies was the development of a vision statement. So this vision statement, which I've presented to you before, really starts to flesh out how we want to focus the outcomes of a good fare structure for the region. And there's three key goals. One, trying to create a structure that has a degree of simplicity to it. We have 11 fare structures now, fairly complicated, that travelers believe they're getting value for what they're paying, and that there's some degree of consistency. I'm going to skip over this a little bit, but because I've spoken about this study methodology, just to remind you, the three concepts that we have been examining through our modeling is one, a modification of the existing, two, a new zone-based system, and finally, a hybrid that includes a combination of both fare by distance and flat fares. What we're finding, the first, a few things, when we look at the first concept, being that it is a modification of the status quo, by virtue of that, it's obvious to a certain degree that it is a lot simpler to implement. It does create a high increase in GO ridership, and it does sort of minimize transfers between the TTC and 905 system, and it reduces trips between 905 transit systems, which is reduction of trips. Transit trips is not something, we're trying to increase transit trips, not reduce them. The zone-based and the flat fare plus fare by distance are a bit more complicated to implement, and they both have greater challenges with regard to the impacts on ridership. And they both have customers will have to significantly change their mindset about how they're traveling to a certain degree, in particular zone, because it's not municipal boundaries no longer become not necessarily become the differentiator between a trip. Some early findings. The good news is all three concepts use transit mean that customers are able to use transit more seamlessly, and that there is an uptick in terms of the amount of multimodal trips that increase. There's also, when we build a more integrated fare system, we learn that there's a kind of general uplift in the amount of social, economic, and environmental benefits that our transit system begins to offer. That it's also, we are learning that the ambition to think that we can increase ridership of transit and increase revenue at equal amounts of substantially of equal amounts is actually not quite possible. That for each 1% of new ridership requires a short-term revenue reduction, about 5 to 7%. And in the longer term, they may be even able to even out, but it means in the short term, for any that kind of trying to think we could achieve both is a lot more difficult. A couple other things. The boundary condition between the City of Toronto and the rest of the region is a critical one for us. It is a place where the double fare situation is at its most significant, and therefore, if we're able to address that around the boundary, we are able to address some of the major barriers that the current fare structure is exhibiting. And we think that for longer distance trips, the research is showing that it should be left on the table. We should not be taking that off the table too soon. Finally, that modifications to existing have the benefits I talked about before, which is there is no inherently large cost to developing the new fare system. We can work from what we have now. It would not necessarily require fares in terms of the actual price to be set by authorities. It would be important to have guiding, what I call governing policies about fares. And of course, it's working with what we have. So a lot of the allocation conversations, while not simple, would not as complicated. The issue of social equity has emerged repeatedly from amongst all our stakeholders and the general public to make sure that we are understanding how any shift in a fare structure impacts those who are less fortunate in our community. We want to make sure that the policies that we put in place can be combined with other mechanisms, either existing or new ones, to address the issue of equity and access. We are looking at evaluating the concepts to understand what if we reduce the cost of transit trips and how does that benefit higher income groups, and by converse, if we reduce the cost of cross-boundary travel to employment outside the financial core, how does that benefit lower income residents relative to their ability to access jobs. And then we are also doing some further analysis of impacts of the concepts on travel by different income sectors. In terms of next steps, this is an important journey we're on with our discussions with municipalities, stakeholders, and the public. We have a lot more analytical work to do to test what I would now refer to as the feasibility of the implementation. We're now completed what I call the more theoretical exercise, and we're now going in to understand and dig deeper, particularly in concept 1, which we think, regardless if you do want to move to concept 2 and 3, it is a longer range proposition, and concept 1 would be a stepping stone to either of those two options in any event. So we do need to dig deeper into that. And we are hoping to report back to both this table and the number of working groups that we have and that we've been reporting to, including the table that the Premier and the Minister has convened with elected officials. And we hope to report back to the board, to you in the fall, and work with the Ministry of Transportation to really go through the next steps for the project. That is my presentation. Sorry, I went a little longer than I
Oh, you did a very
hoped.
good job. You did an excellent job.
And I don't know if I've missed anything, probably.
So Leslie, well, let's open it up. I don't need to ask first question. Carl wants to ask first question.
Thank you. My question is related to, actually, if you look at our slide 287, it's slide 15.
Yes.
I'm interested in the modal split, and by doing this, how does it shift the modal split to transit versus auto? And I see that the reduction that you're referencing there in the automotive split reduction, but with an increased population, dramatic increase in population that is being projected, there inevitably will be more auto travel.
Yes.
So what's the modal split reduction in real terms, considering that increase, the natural increase in automotive travel? What are we really accomplishing with this exercise? I know that the RER is a big change to begin with, which will have an effect on it, but strictly based on fare integration.
So when we're doing our examination, and I'll get Yves to add more, we forecast out to 2031. We're not doing just in today's real time. So we anticipate the growth that you're describing into our calculations, and that this specific percentage is specific to the increment that fare integration would offer. This is not in total for the whole region relative to all the other transit infrastructure that we're investing. So this is sort of what specific to fare integration as opposed to the total that we expect from all our policy and investments. But Yves, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
Before you answer that, if you don't mind, so the number of 170 to 320 million vehicle kilometers reduction, is that a net figure or a gross figure? I guess that's what I'm trying to
So
get my
that's
head around.
So that's the net figure of actual vehicle travel. But in terms of the modal split, there are a number of different pieces to it. The ridership, the scenarios that we looked at had an actual ridership growth of about 1% for the region, and that's associated with a certain financial cost to reduce the fares accordingly. So you get ridership growth depending on your your financing policy from the ridership growth. You also get modal shift for access to the transit. So the first point that Leslie was pointing out here is that if people can transfer more easily between different services, they leave the car at home and use transit to get to transit, and that is a reduction as well in auto use.
Thanks. I just need to have that in my background, in my head, to understand the value of this in comparison to the cost.
Yeah.
Abkar and then Ann.
So Leslie, my question maybe for you or Bruce was at the last meeting and at the committee meeting yesterday, we talked about the timing, I think is the fall of 2016, but give us an idea of when do we get to the financial implications and the discussion around those with respect to the fare integration question? You've established the principles and the framework and the common understanding amongst the various partners, but maybe give us a sense of the timing if you can.
So my hope is that the fall would be the time that we can begin to, well, we would have, because we have to do this work over the course of the next several months, that would be the time that we would want to share with you, because we need to break it down, not on the, we have the, we have the beginnings of the macro numbers, but in order to tease it down to understand the implications by municipality or by operator, it takes a little more time. We want to do it in conversation with the operators themselves. We don't want to do it in a little back room. We want to have that conversation with them so that when we do present it to you, it represents not just my opinion, but the understanding of our other partners.
I have Ann and then Howard.
Mine was just a technical follow-up to Carl's question, that in the work we're doing at Ryerson, I've become aware of the fact that the growth projections for population and where they live in the last year, they're different. They have provincial projections, and there's been some revision. Are we using the revision showing, in fact, more of the concentration actually in the built-up urban areas? I'm just wondering if you're using the latest projections, if you're aware of that.
So we're using, yes, so if you're referring to the 2041 forecast that the Growth Secretariat has, that's our base case, is what we're starting from, as well as we're also using the 2030. So we have both sets of numbers. What we also do is sensitivity analysis in and around those numbers, because everyone knows that sometimes the forecasts and the modeling are not exactly as they're defined. So we are doing sensitivity on either side of those. So the optimistic, the highly optimistic to that, and less so.
I'm not sure if it was NEPTIS or ULI or somebody came up with some new numbers this year. I honestly don't know who, and I'll check and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a ULI number, nor am I aware of the NEPTIS numbers.
I don't have that fact.
But doesn't the City of Toronto use different numbers than you use
Yes,
for some aspects of this modeling?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
I thought when we were talking about modeling likely demand on Smart Track and different things, that they were using some different numbers than us.
The base numbers are the same where we start. The place where we have slightly different numbers, and that's why we use both, not just one or the other, are in the employment forecast. So the city has, so it's got a range of employment forecasts, some of which are consistent with the growth plan and some which are, slightly different. So we've been trying to kind of mediate between those two to make sure we understand the implications of either scenario.
The city has a different view than the province as to where the employment will be located, or how much employment there will be in total in the GTHA?
Both, and they're, because things are in transition, meaning the growth plan is undergoing a review with new numbers, and the city is also doing its official plan. They're in this transition place where none have actually landed. So we end up, on our end, having to work between to try and figure out, depending where they land, because of course the conformity exercise for the growth plan has yet to happen for the City of Toronto.
Howard.
In terms of just looking at concept one,
Yes.
in terms of modifying it, it's easiest for 905 or TTC? I'm very curious.
For everybody, because it's, when I say for everybody, it's because it's a modification on the existing. It's not a restructuring of the whole I'll use the term, the governance of how we think about fare structure. So,
And then how consistent is that? So, for example, fare by distance, for example, can be established flat. I understand the issues of cross-boundary issues, but in terms of this, are we saying then that we could revise that, how do you say, we could upgrade and revise as the system evolves?
so concept one is,
negotiation?
sorry, concept one is primarily a co-fare proposal,
Okay.
which basically takes our existing co-fare system that we have with all the 905s, and then we don't have a co-fare arrangement either with GO and TTC or TTC to 905. And so it would introduce that. There would have to be a discussion about, can we create a more uniform set of policies around the co-fare across the region? And that's what concept one begins to look at. The other two, the zone is divide up the region geographically, and 3 is flat fares combined with a fare by distance. So the latter two are more would be more difficult in terms of complication, the complexity of the negotiations.
But the outcome?
Pardon me?
So difficult by complexity of negotiation, but how about the guarantee? How about the outcome, the result?
In terms of, I guess that would be part of the negotiation to see what we could land.
Okay.
But first, before we start negotiate, we want to figure out what would be the best way forward, and before we start any kind of detailed discussion.
Okay.
So Leslie, I think part of what makes this conversation hard is there are no numbers.
Yes.
Are you saying by the next time we discuss this, let's say by December, we'll have numbers so that we'll have a sense of, and I don't mean to the last decimal point, I'm just looking for, is it a $10 million issue, a $50 million issue, a $100 million issue, and on different proposals? When will we get these order of magnitude numbers? So for those of us that can't work in abstraction, can only work with our hands-on, when will we have those numbers?
I am hopeful that it will be in September.
September? Oh, not
Well,
December. Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
that's me being hopeful.
Okay. Second question. Second question, and this is almost a risky question to ask because it might be misinterpreted.
Okay.
But when I think about this problem, and I'll confess I can't find my way through the problem, I say to myself, what if, as an act of God, suddenly one organization, not Metrolinx, not anybody else, just a new organization, owned all the transit systems in the area? GO, TTC, Durham, Oakville, everybody. I'm not advocating that. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying, if one organization was suddenly created that owned all of these and was told to develop a fare policy, is that the problem we're trying to solve for, but recognizing we're 9, 10 different transit agencies? Is the right way to think about this is what would a single agency do if it didn't matter where the subsidies were moving to back and forth across the different organizations, which is vitally important to all the individual components when we have 10. But if we were one, we'd only have a single bottom line. Is it a useful way to think about what fare policy would the board of this super agency articulate and impose, knowing they bore all the costs and all the benefits of doing so?
So first,
the reason I ask that is I'm trying to sort out how much of this is each agency, ourselves included, concerned about our revenues and protective of our individual viability, and that it's hard to get beyond that, or how much is that this is just a really hard problem, no matter how you think about it, and with real big costs that we need to sort out. But does it help you to think about it as what would a single agency do for this region if there were such a hypothetical agency?
so first of all, that's a pretty big question. I would say that was the approach we tried to take when we started. So we've learned a lot about if this was and it is, to be frank, a fairly political issue, as we've seen in the media. We've tried to take the approach, stand back Forget what everybody has going on. Let's try and figure out what would be the right thing for everybody. And that's where we've started, and that's where we try to stay on track. It is very difficult in an environment for some transit operators where they're struggling from an operating standpoint to balance the books, to have that conversation when on a day-to-day basis they're challenged by these things. So we've tried to elevate the conversation. It is where we'd like to be at in terms of how to approach it. We've tried to take that, but it's hard to do it in this environment, I have to say. So what we've been presenting and what we've been trying to work with the other operators, the fact of getting to the mission goals statement, that was a collective effort of all staff, as much as it seems kind of motherhood, was a huge effort. And that if we were a separate or somebody else, third party, that's the way you would go about doing it anyways. Let's start from what we're all trying to achieve and then work our way through.
And then you'd
And on
articulate a fair policy, is my image of it.
But all that being said, on top of all of that, it's just plain technically complicated in addition. So it's not a straight linear mathematical calculation as everybody would like it to be. There are way too many variables. We had to design our own model, and even we're developing it. So one would consider it almost a beta version of what anyone would do. So it's a hard question, Rob, and I wish I had an easy answer, but
I guess it's the case, just thinking out loud here, just listening to you. No transit agency ever has the opportunity to invent a fare system from scratch. Because that's where you sit influences what you see.
Exactly.
And everyone has a history. And here we have 10 histories at work, not just one set of histories. So I guess the hypothetical exercise doesn't really help you.
Well, it helps.
Because we're always dealing with coming from where we are.
It helps you in terms as a point of reference. It doesn't necessarily tell you what the solution is. So you understand if this work, because this work has never been done before, to understand, you have to answer the question first, exactly as you say. If we started from scratch, what would we do? Knowing that and knowing what we know now, then how do we move forward? And that's what we're trying to at least establish, that piece of data and analysis from which we can have a good informed discussion.
So let me ask you a different question. I've dropped that earlier thought. The City of Toronto put out a paper that says, I'm being unfair to all the subtlety of it, but it says in effect that GO has a pricing system of making short rides relatively more expensive than long rides. Because as I understand it, there's a base cost to every ride and then distance is added on it. And if that base number is large, it makes short trips much more expensive per kilometer than long trips. And if that base number gets small, then the correspondence of distance and price gets closer. And if you eliminate the base fee and just charge for the first kilometer at the same price you charge for every kilometer, it'd be neutral from short to long. And they're advocating, as I read it, that we get rid of the base fee or greatly reduce it so that short trips would get much cheaper, and if we were going to be revenue neutral at GO, long trips would be more expensive if we were going to be revenue neutral. And they do that because they want it to be a good substitute for a currently inexpensive subway that goes a long way. So to be comparable, it's got to be inexpensive. I think that's their argument. What do other jurisdictions do for charging for commuter rail services like GO has historically been, realizing it's morphing into something different through RER? If we looked around 10 major jurisdictions, would they all have some kind of base fee plus by distance? Or do some of them go pure distance? Or how does it work elsewhere? I know what GO is, but how does it work elsewhere in the world?
It's very variable. And my first comment would be what you described, that the city is described in their piece, is not dissimilar from our option 3 in many respects. It's similar to our option 3, what they're talking about, which is one of the concepts we're looking at. So, but to the point of what do others do, there's no hard and fast rule. Some do what we do. Some vary it. Some bring it closer. Some are just a pure fare by distance, no flat fare combined. So there's no rule of thumb, unless Eve corrects me.
Well, I think it's fair to say that all commuter rails have some distance
Yeah.
component,
Yeah.
whether it's zones or fare by distance.
They all have some distance component, but do they all also have some
Flat
fixed
fare.
component?
Yeah.
And the reason I can imagine they have fixed component is, everybody uses Union Station, whether you travel a kilometer or 30 kilometers, your use of Union Station is the same amount if you're coming into Union, and that piece of the system is a fixed price, it's not variable with distance, and the sort of standby availability of the place is kind of a fix. So do most
They have
places that charge by distance, like we do, also include some fixed fee, which has the effect the city observes of making short trips more expensive than they would be?
They do. The question I think the city says is the gap, the distance between what is we consider our base and what the city's base TTC fare is. So we're about $5 is where we start, and the TTC, of course, is about a $280, $290 fare. So they're suggesting that we compress that gap to make shorter trips comparable between TTC and GO, and that's something that we're looking at. The other thing, just
So I'd be
to add-
interested, when you could come back, in knowing more about how other commuter rail systems think about this, as to whether there is a fixed fee and what's the magnitude of it. Sort of, I say fixed, a sort of a base fee that doesn't vary with distance.
Yeah. Okay, happy to do that.
Other questions or comments on this? This is the hardest issue on our plate, in my view. Not the biggest issue of all this building bigger, but this is the hardest conceptually.
It is.
And it involves 10 proud operators, each of which have bottom lines to make work. Okay, does you want a resolution telling you to keep going?
Yeah, I'm hoping, it's an update. You could do a resolution to
Is
tell
it
me
just for
stop.
information, or is there force in the resolution?
No, there's no
There is no
specific
resolution.
resolution. It's just an update.
Received.
Receive.
Carl, last comment.
It's a question. So I look forward to the September report, but I'm asking a question of process. What is the jurisdiction of Metrolinx board then in establishing this and the other 9 agencies? Is approval necessary from each? Does one have a veto? So where do you accommodate a final decision?
Bruce?
So right now, our statute doesn't provide us with the authority to put in place a solution in this space. So I think it would have to be, in the current legislative framework, a cooperative arrangement. And that a lot of the work that we've done has been that kind of a cooperative arrangement. The Presto system right now is a cooperative in essence. But when you do look around the world, another question would be is, what's the institutional framework you want to put in place to manage these different kinds of approaches? Option one, the other benefit of option one is it allows us to basically work off of the existing governance approaches, while options 2 and 3 would likely require some new kinds of institutional arrangements be put in place.
So negotiation and understanding cooperation is obviously the best way to go. But is it conceivable that if one particular agency doesn't agree with the solution that the rest have come up with, that they're simply opting out? I mean, it's maybe a redundant question right now, but I'm trying to understand where we will ultimately land from a process standpoint, not the actual cost.
Well, I think, practically speaking, we have 2 scenarios. One scenario would be is that it is a cooperative effort and we come to a consensus position. The other scenario would be it's not, in which case there has to be some kind of a decision that's put in place. And that's not a decision that Metrolinx can implement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. It's a hard problem. Before we forget, I want to break from the agenda to move a resolution that the board appoint Peggy Gilmore as Director of Internal Audit. Brian, would you move that?
Certainly.
Howard, would you second that motion? We discussed this at the audit committee yesterday. Peggy Gilmore comes to us with exceptional credentials and a distinguished record of business accomplishment. She also has worked at the Bank of Montreal, which makes her particularly suitable for joining us here.
Uxbridge. No, I'm kidding.
And she's,
That's not Uxbridge.
we feel very fortunate that she's agreed to join us to head internal audit and relieve Steve Naylor, who's been doing it on a part-time interim basis. Peggy is in the audience. Why don't you stand up, Peggy, and they'll see if we can get the vote through here. Anybody all in favor, please? Any opposed? Congratulations, Peggy. Unanimous. Not surprising. We're delighted to have you join us. Thank you very much. And that internal audit is, of course, a board appointment. That's why it's coming to the board, not just being dealt with at the committee. That brings us to the Regional Transportation Plan Review Discussion Paper. There is a resolution here seeking approval of going public with this paper and putting it up on the site, so to invite comments and then report back. We've allocated 10 minutes to this, Leslie, but we're running 6 minutes behind, so if you can do it in less than 10 minutes, that would be desirable.
I'm happy to do it in less than 10. This is the follow-up to the 2008 Regional Transportation Plan, the big move. Our legislation requires that we do, that we review and revise and update the plan. What we are presenting to you is the discussion paper that will form the basis of a draft plan that we hope to bring forward in the new year, in 2017. So we have an extensive, about a 1-year period, maybe 9 months, that we want to take this forward and have a fairly comprehensive region-wide conversation. For your information, slide 12 in the deck really points to the key places that we want to make sure that we are adding and we see as opportunities for the next version of the plan. First of all, we have, since 2008, significant amount of commitments to rapid transit, so that becomes now our base case upon which we build the next version of the plan. We know that there is a lot more happening in different types of mobility and transit services because as a result of new technologies, shared mobility. We want to also better understand how the integration of the regional network with the local network, and that's particularly on things like the first and the last mile. This was an area that we spoke to in the original plan, but we think is worthy of much more investigation, especially given the investments in things like the Regional Express Rail and the LRT program. The only other points I would like to make are relative to the types of areas that we hope to seek input from the public and our stakeholders on, and we've sort of organized them in these 8 categories. So there's, just so you understand how the discussion paper is going to be structured. And then there is particularly a new themed area on new mobility. This is really asking the questions around new modes of access in the region. So I'm not going to go through more of the slides because I think you've had the opportunity to review them. We are at the very sort of beginning of this conversation. A lot of what we've put forward is backed by, if you've had a chance to look at the more detailed draft paper, a lot of additional research that we've worked with both in the academic community and some of our other stakeholders to advance the thinking and to bring it up to date. So I think, Mr. Chair, in the area of expedience, I will just turn it over to you.
Thank you. So this is to trigger a discussion rather than end a discussion.
Yeah.
So it'll all come back to the board in due course. Does anybody have anything they wish to say about this before we seek approval to let Leslie and the team go public? Anne?
Well, I like the framework, Leslie.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the performance indicators, in a normal strategic plan, you would have a financial indicator. But I guess, you know what I mean, we're dependent on our revenue from fees and from government. You know, I'm just saying if you were doing a normal strategic plan, you would have one of your balls would be money, wouldn't it?
You want to respond to that?
I think you may be on the next item on the agenda.
Oh, am I on Regional Transportation Plan Review?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
This guy, page 317.
Okay, sorry.
It doesn't bother me, so I mean, it's just the only thing that I,
What page are you on?
What slide,
317 of,
317?
Carl, do
Am
you
I on
know
the
what
wrong
slide
page?
that is?
No, not necessarily.
Performance.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just getting to where you are in.
this is like the performance indicators that we're
Yeah,
gonna be judging, you know.
correct.
Like we're gonna look at mode and you know.
So you're suggesting that in addition to these KPIs, that we should also be including something that talks about
No, I'm actually not
financial
suggesting it,
performance?
because I guess maybe we're different. I'm raising it because when we're asked to review it, normally you would see there'd be a financial component to your performance indicators
So
in any
the-
strategic.
Do you mean the financial component being the cost of congestion? That's the number we've used in the previous plan.
No, in terms of a performance indicator as to how our system is performing.
Right, well, one way of measuring it financially is to say, are we reducing the costs of congestion?
And
Are we managing the funds, or are we maximizing?
For regional.
So, maybe,
I didn't have an answer to my question.
I think Leslie.
yeah, maybe I think that's a good takeaway for us, but what I want to remind everyone that the plan is not specific to what Metrolinx is performing, it's for the whole region. So I think maybe we can take that away and see how, if it's possible for the whole plan. Things like the next item, our 5-year strategy, is Metrolinx specific in terms of, and we have better ability to manage and monitor those aspects of the financial piece.
Maybe it's the overall
Yeah.
ball is our ability
Yeah.
as a system
Yeah.
to financially
Yeah. Did we do that?
build, plan, and operate and sustain on a sustainable way, or something like. Have we got a?
I think I will go back, sorry,
I agree. I completely agree. Is this system
I was-
sustaining itself? Are we building?
One of my learnings from the transit panel, like one of my big learnings that I didn't know when I got into it, was how much it costs to operate a system and to sustain the system more than build the system, depending on what you're building. It's the less sophisticated the system. So buses, it doesn't, the capital cost is not as big a share as if you're building a heavy rail system. But in general, the what it takes to operate and maintain and renew, this is the big burden. And just I find, in general, as governments, we don't plan for, that's never the public part of it. All the discussion right now in the press is all about what is it going to cost to build this system, build that system. It's all about the capital cost. The public is never involved in the debate over maintenance. So I just raise it as a question: should we have a performance indicator related to fiscal sustainability?
so a lot of the questions, if you remember, we have always considered that this would be the plan, and there would need to be a companion, what we refer to as an implementation plan. Our earlier investment strategy document spoke in many respects about how to move towards a more sustainable and being able to measure the cost of the plan, our ability to move towards achieving the plan. So I think it's a good point, Anne, and if you could let us take that away to see how we could appropriately address it, I'm happy to do that.
With that undertaking, will you move the approval of this, Ann?
I would be glad to do so.
Carl, would you second this? I will. Does anybody have any further discussion? I see none. All in favor? That's approved. That brings us to the Metrolinx 5-year strategy. This is we do every year, rolling out 5 years out. Leslie, you still have the floor. I don't know when you sleep. The number of reports you produce for us is amazing. What do you need to say on this one?
First, I want to point out that the reason, the one highlight of this 5-year strategy was in response to the board's request that we kind of revisit it, rethink, and basically understand how we can package it well, given the changes that are emerging, because the previous 5-year strategy was sort of an incremental accretion over the years. So as a management team and with key management in the organization, we took a step back. We revisited. We didn't start from scratch. We built from what we had, but we've gone an exercise where we've shifted just how we've packaged the priorities. So in this version of our vision, you'll see that there are 4 priority focus areas. I'll name them: the transformation of regional mobility, a safe, high-quality, and connected customer experience, financial stewardship and accountability, and the importance of earning and maintaining public trust. So the vision has been refined. You'll notice as well that where our goal is to organize the document in the 4 categories of plan, deliver, operate, and connect. And we've shortened it So it's not so much of a laundry list of items. We've tried to be more strategic on what's included in the strategy, as it should be. And we think this is a marked improvement from the last version, but we await your judgment on that.
And was there a reason you decided to make Bruce the new age casual guy without a tie, and you made me look like kind of a old, out-of-it guy wearing a tie?
As the recommendation that says, subject to minor editing and formatting, so I think,
I suggest you make me the new age guy and Bruce the old school guy.
so we will edit and format as desired.
I know that's heavy lifting to accomplish that transformation. Comments on this? This is very responsive to what we asked you to do.
Robert, it reads really well. I thought compared to what we've seen in the past, this was a nice organization and framework. I did have a question, though, in this strategy as well as the previous discussion. There's not been a lot that's come to this table around goods movement. And yet I also noticed that one of the, I can't remember whether it was a KPI, might have been a KPI, was around urban freight.
Yes.
So where does that discussion occur in terms of our strategy and thinking?
Richard Corso would be extremely pleased with you for having asked that question, having taken his place to carry that flag. What's happened, Leslie, with Richard's retirement?
So just as context, at Metrolinx, we've really focused on what we refer to as the intra-regional movement of goods and freight. And we have an ongoing forum with key leaders in logistics around the region, and as well good liaison with MTO on cross-boundary goods movement. One of the key areas of discussion has been around movement of goods on rail, versus on road, and that's a discussion that we engage with the freight operators on, and they're part of that discussion. So it's an ongoing conversation. We aren't actively doing what I would call specific studies on that, but it is on our radar. It's not necessarily we're not at a point of a deep dive right now. Just to be clear, we have, in terms of all the things we have on our plate.
Not that you don't have a full plate, I recognize that. I just wondered if it was on.
No, it's not off our radar. It is in the radar. Just might not be at the center of the radar.
Thank you.
Other comments on this before we seek approval? Bill, you'll approve this?
I will. I like the pictures, by the way.
Howard, you second this one? All in favor? That's good. That's done. That's nice. We're 1 minute ahead of schedule. It's excellent. Next is the annual report. We have had that be reviewed by the audit committee yesterday, and it was well received there. And we had our external auditors also comment on all the financials. Brian, will you take the lead on this one?
Certainly, and I hope that our finance people are in the
Robert Siddle's at the back there. Why don't you come to the floor just in case there's a question, Robert?
The annual report does embrace our audited financial statements. They comprise the last 16 or 17 pages of what is probably a 50-page document, the front end of which provides, I think, an excellent summary of activities over the past year. And the financial statements, of course, record the financial aspects of that activity over the year just ended. We did receive a report from our external auditors who are new this year, PricewaterhouseCoopers. They brought fresh eyes to the file, and notwithstanding that they were looking to turn over every rock, they commended our internal accounting staff as having prepared very complete and accurate financials, so much so that there were actually no adjustments to the drafts that were submitted to them, which for an organization this size is quite extraordinary. Now, at the time of our meeting yesterday, PricewaterhouseCoopers was still awaiting one or two confirmation letters from third parties to confirm outstanding receivables. And I don't know, one of the reasons why I asked Robert to come forward, do we now have everything in hand?
Well, again, everything except for some of the things that are required as board approval, for example, in the management rep letter that Bruce and I have to sign off on.
Right.
But I'm confident that
But
we'll
all the numbers therefore have
Yep.
been attested to as a with that background, and again, the fact that PricewaterhouseCoopers has issued what, excuse me, in the jargon we call a clean opinion. They had no reservations on the financial statements. I would be pleased to move a resolution that I believe is yes, it does. It says that the Metrolinx annual report 2015-16, including the audited financial statements for the year ended March 31st of 15, be approved. And it's got a second part, that the CEO submit the annual report to the Minister of Transportation and to the Minister of Finance in accordance with the Metrolinx Act of 2006. And as Rob has pointed out, before that is done, both the CEO and the Chief Financial and the Chair, I believe it's the Chair of the Board, are required to sign a management letter confirming that. And on behalf of the Audit Committee, I can say we were comfortable seeing you sign that.
Thank you.
So that's the resolution.
Thank you very much. And this becomes a public document only when it's tabled in the legislature, is that right, Bruce?
It doesn't become a final document until it's tabled in legislature. We do post it on our website as a draft, and then we update it once it gets tabled.
Got it. Because there can sometimes be quite a gap between when it's submitted, which we'll do in the days ahead, and when it's tabled in the legislature. And sometimes people ask, where's your annual report? And that's the reason for the gap between a draft and the final version. You're moving that. Is there a member of the Audit Committee who would second it? Carl has. Are there any questions? We had a good discussion of it, I thought, at the last meeting.
Go ahead.
Ian,
No, I was just going to offer to second it.
that's what I thought. Bonnie?
Just a question. When I reread it again a couple of days ago, I was struck by how much focus we spend on customer service and customer standards, satisfaction ratings, etc. And there isn't really a strong statement or emphasis through the annual report on what I think are quite remarkable deliverables in terms of satisfaction and delivery on time, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a thought, whether it's this annual report or another, I actually think that's a hallmark of what we're trying to do, which is the focus on the customer experience. Now, you find bits and pieces of it through the piece, but it might be something to think about for another year.
Yep, and thank you. We'll certainly take a look at that. We're very proud of the fact that, for example, GO Transit's at 84% customer satisfaction rating, and I think that's something to celebrate. We always want to nudge north of that, but it's a good outcome for this past fiscal year.
Yeah, it's a good report.
And it's not stated in the
it's not.
actual, in our 10th year, we've accomplished goals set out. There's nothing in there about that, and I just thought that's an enormous deliverable to the communities we serve. But anyway.
Thank you.
All in favor? Any opposed? That's approved. Thank you very much to all staff who contributed to making that happen. That brings us to the report of the Customer Experience Committee, which comes from its distinguished chair, Marianne McKenna. Marianne.
Thank you, Rob. I'd just like to start by reminding all of us that we have a customer advisory committee, and probably that Carl Zare chairs that, and probably that's the closest that we get to day-to-day reports from customers. And I think one of the items that he highlighted at our meeting was the issue of safety, and it was safety related to parking lots. So to my point about the mission and mandate sort of expanding, we've gone from on the rail in a train to out into parking lots. So it's such a broader, bigger issue. So very pleased to have him doing that day-to-day service. Not that they're not members of the board that ride the rails. We had highlighted for us at the Customer Experience Advisory from that as well the new sign real-time bus information that's being put onto the bus stops. And I think communication's equally important, that we're telling people what is happening. And so via the web, digital signage, kiosks, tests, and IVR, helping customers self-serve and improving customer communications is a major item going forward. The second item is the GO Transit update, making the purchasing of tickets more convenient and worry-free by providing self-service options to enhance customers' experience while reducing the cost to serve customers. So there also have been GO reported that they've initiated safety programs to counter bike theft, car crime, and assault. And we were especially pleased to hear the plans to improve safety for bikes and cars at the GO stations. Presto continues apace, a major milestone of achieving 2 million activated cards. I think there is a campaign, Tap Happy campaign in May to thank and welcome new customers and promote awareness of convenient customer features. There was a contest. Presto's Twitter followers increased 6% and now has over 10,000 followers, and Facebook fans increased 27% and now has 7,300 followers. Second point, the fare gate pilot at Main Street opened, was implemented in the spring, and these new fare gates are continuing to be deployed across the remaining subway stations. The Presto bus rollout has been completed at the first of 7 bus divisions, so I think we will continue to see the uptake on the Presto system, which is kind of a huge credit to the leadership of Rob Hollis, and continues to be will continue to sort of serve the GTHA. The Up Express, we had the report. As per the CEO's earlier statistics on ridership, the Up Express continues to grow. Week-over-week analysis shows a 5% growth. So, currently, approximately 80% of the Up guests are airport-bound or destined. This June 6th was the first anniversary of the opening of the Up Express, and this was celebrated on social media, and guests were treated to several surprise and delight activities throughout the system. So guest satisfaction is high at 81%. 81% of those surveyed were likely to ride Up Express again, and 77% likely to recommend Up Express to others. The fifth bullet point is design excellence update, and really to remind us that design excellence, as per my earlier comments, is about looking at the touchstones of customer experience and how the kind of interface with the customer and also the community. The design excellence team has worked with to socialize the Davenport Diamond upgrade, and notwithstanding there are still not full acceptance. I would say that the team is continuing to make progress, working with the local neighbourhood, the councillors, and the City of Toronto. We had a report on the pre-qualified shortlist of both Canadian and international artists for the Eglinton Crosstown for an integrated art program, and the artists and artwork concepts will be announced later in July. Signage is continuing to be improved. A regional transit wayfinding harmonization initiative is underway with pilot testing of new signs taking place at Pickering GO Station, the Hamilton GO Station, and Finch Station in spring 2017. Again, communication and legibility. And I've particularly enjoyed being able to get off the TTC and find my way to the Metrolinx offices, I've been like a rat running around in circles most of the time. So I would say signage is hugely important to a kind of legible path, and makes the journey much less frustrating if you can find your way from Union Station to Up Express. So I think it is beginning to work. But it is, again, it's an iterative process. We look forward to updating you again this fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Thank you. Excellent committee meeting yesterday. Lots going on. Carl, thank you for your leadership of the advisory committee. It's always quite amazing to me how just a group of 7 or 8 people can bring such value through their diligence and willingness to share their thinking. We learn every single time from that.
Ground level.
It really brings a lot of value to our work. Really excellent. Any questions to Mary Ann? I see none. That brings us to the quarterly reports, if I have it right. I'm sorry, I've just got my, I'm in the wrong place here. Report of the board's quarterly reports. So we have Presto. Robert Hollis is probably still here. There he is at the back. We already have heard quite a bit about Presto over the last couple of days. Anything more on Presto's report? Keep up the good work, Robert. Thank you. That brings us to operations, which is Greg Percy. Are you Greg for these purposes, Bruce, if there are any questions?
I can try, and Matt and Mary are here as well if there are any specific questions.
Are there any questions? Great on-time performance. Wonderful to see it in such strong shape despite tough day yesterday. Everything working out there today, man?
Better now. We had an earlier issue fatality, unfortunately, but we've recovered from that since.
And the things that went wrong last night are working today? Okay. Thank you for all of that. Planning and policy, I can't imagine you have anything more to say, Leslie. You've said a lot of good stuff. Okay, a lot of good stuff. Any questions of Leslie? Communications, Judy, are you here?
Right here.
Any questions to Judy? Or any comment you want to make, Judy, on where you're at?
No,
Since you haven't had any time.
Oh, I've had lots of time. You just can't see it.
Nothing you want to add?
No, I'm good, thank you.
No questions to Judy? Capital projects, John, where's John? Over there, John Jensen. We've heard lots from John over recent meetings, not as much today, but implicit in the whole RER is a huge workload to John's group. Any questions to John on his report? Thank you. These give us a really, really good sense of where we're at in having these reports, so thank you. Please don't take the lack of questions as evidence of deficiency. Take it as evidence of the thoroughness and usefulness of the reports that you produce for us. Is there any other matter any member of the board wishes to raise in public session before we take a break? We're going to take a break for media availability, and then we will have a procurement matter to deal with after that, and we'll reconvene in this room for the procurement. It's a commercially sensitive procurement matter, so we'll do that in closed session. May I close by thanking the Deputy Minister for coming. Do you want to make any comments, Deputy, before you may never have this chance again? It's not a standing invitation, it's a one-time deal.
No, nothing to say, just thank you very much for having an opportunity to be at the subcommittee meetings yesterday and meeting the board members, and for being here today. I really appreciate it. So I see it from a different vantage point at MTO, but it's great to sort of follow the files through all the machinations and work that everybody around this table does, so I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for taking a big chunk of time over 2 days to be with us. We appreciate it. Take it as a sign of respect and partnership, and we're really grateful to you for it. Sure. With that, thank you all very much for being here. We stand adjourned. We'll reconvene in about 20 minutes in this room.